to the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast with your hosts, Reese Downing and Jacob Workman.
What's up, guys? It is TNT Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NFL Edition, Week 17. We are 2 weeks away from playoff season. It is getting crazy up in here. With me, as always, is co-host and fine citizen, Mr. Jacob Workman. Workman, what's going on, man? How you feeling?
Well, something happened for essentially the first time in my life. It's I mean, it has happened since I've been alive, but there was not really much memory of it. The Lions, they've won the division. I haven't been able to say that in quite a long time. And actually, I've never been able to say that when it's the NFC North. So for the first time ever, they are the NFC North champions. And we have secured a home playoff game at Ford Field, which is something I've been wanting for a long time. And with some crazy things that happened last night, the number 1 seed's actually back in play for the Lions. So
yeah,
there's some crazy things going on.
Yeah, just 2 weeks ago, if not that, it seemed like a lot of the NFC side of the equation was locked in place. And after the game against Baltimore last night, that is no longer the case. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. These last 2 weeks are very much still up in play for a lot of teams. So
yeah.
One of those teams that did manage to take care of business is the Detroit Lions. So well done there. Congratulations to MCDC and the boys. All right, let's move into some quick recap here. Last week's pick results. Workman finished 8-8. I finished 5-11. A lot of really crazy games happened over the course of the last week, 2 weeks, really. We've seen some really interesting games go ways that we did not think were going to happen. San Francisco, Baltimore being one of them. Kansas City is throwing a lot of people for a loop. Buffalo is surging at an opportune time for them. So things have been a little crazy. We both missed our locks last week. Jake locked in on Kansas City. I locked in on Indy. Both of those teams did not take care of business. And we are both under 500 again. So Jake's total record is 113, 123, and 4. I am 116, 120, and 4. So we are close to being 500, and we got 2 weeks to get this figured out here. So we'll see how things shake out. I have a feeling that these last 2 weeks are going to be equally crazy.
Yeah.
As we move into these games. So
especially because a lot of these games matter.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got, half the teams in the league don't have their starting quarterback. Like, there's just a lot happening right now.
Yeah.
There's a ton of teams that are still in the bubble. There's not that many teams that are eliminated yet. It's a crazy time for football. So it's interesting, and I'm glad, because it keeps things, tied in here through the end of the year. I think we're going to probably see a good amount of teams that would typically be sitting players the last week of the year, maybe pulling in all of their starters next week. So that's another thing that could potentially be interesting. But let's talk a little bit about that San Francisco Baltimore game. So Baltimore won 33-19 in San Francisco. Lamar Jackson finished 23-35 for 252 and 2 touchdowns. He was also their leading rusher, 7 carries, 45 yards. Zay Flowers, rookie at BC, he finished with 9 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown. He was their leading receiver. On the San Francisco side of the ball, Brock Purdy went 18 for 32 for 255 and 4 interceptions. Baltimore ended up with 5 picks in the game, but they got 4 picks from Brock Purdy alone. Christian McCaffrey had a Christian McCaffrey game. He finished with 14 carries for 103 yards and a touchdown. And George Kittle also had a solid game, 7 receptions for a 126. If you look at the numbers on how that game shook out, San Francisco led the way. They had 429 yards of total offense versus Baltimore's 343, 308 passing yards versus Baltimore's 241. They had 121 rushing yards versus Baltimore's 102, and they were averaging 6.3 yards per play versus Baltimore's 5.4. The difference is turnovers, and it was substantial. We also had a good amount of penalties. There were 16 total penalties in that game. Ended up being about 170 yards in offense in total. this defense on Baltimore's side really made a statement. San Francisco got a safety to kick off the game in the first quarter and then a field goal. So they went up 5-zip. Justin Tucker knocked in a field goal with a minute left in the first quarter to take it 3-5. And then first touchdown of the game in the second quarter, run in by Gus Edwards. Another field goal by Justin Tucker was followed by a touchdown from Christian McCaffrey. And then a field goal as time expired took Baltimore into halftime 16-12. And then the third quarter happened. 3 minutes into the third quarter, Baltimore scored a touchdown. Less than a minute after that, Zay Flowers scored a touchdown. And then you had a field goal from Justin Tucker, and it took it to 33-12. And then San Francisco got one touchdown in the fourth quarter, but the end of the game was 33-19. You and I both had San Francisco in that game last week. A lot of people had San Francisco, primarily because the game was at home. But Baltimore made a statement, and there's a couple things that got shook up there. Number one being, how good is San Francisco? Two being, how good is Baltimore compared to some of these other teams? And then the third thing, which we're going to jump into here, is the league MVP conversation, which seemed to be pretty heavily weighted towards Brock Purdy. I don't think that's the situation anymore, and we'll talk about the odds here in just a second. But what were your thoughts on that San Francisco-Baltimore game?
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked, obviously, because if the game was in Baltimore, I would have been on Baltimore. But with it being in San Francisco, I just thought they were going to be a little too much at home for them. But they kind of showed what you have to do. If you can get Purdy to turn the ball over, you can beat this team. And Purdy was not good at all. It was very bad, actually. I mean, Lamar was still Lamar. It wasn't like world record breaking numbers or anything. He just played a good game. He did what he needed to do. But like I said, I think we're starting. I mean, when McCaffrey goes for over 100, Kittle goes for over 100, Ayuk goes for over 100. It's not very often you're going to say the 49ers lost that game.
Yep.
So clearly, when they have at least five turnovers, if not more. I mean, that's a huge deal, and you can't win a game like that. So with playoff time coming up, and I mean, Purdy, I mean, everyone's kind of said like he's perfect for Shanahan, but when he has to do something, has he really ever proven that he is the one that can go out and like win the game? Like in my eyes, he's never been like, yeah, he's managed the game well, but he's never gone out and taken a game over. So I think here in these next few weeks, especially in the playoffs, that's what he's going to have to do. So, I mean, I think the 49ers might be a little bit more beatable than what people once thought they were.
I agree. And there's a lot of stiff competition on the NFC side. So, San Francisco's bode really well against some of the big players. They have not played Detroit this year, but they've looked good against both Philly and Dallas, which those are really the top four teams in the NFC right now. Yeah, it was definitely surprising to me, being that it was in Santa Clara. But the good thing, for us anyway, as football fans, is this opened up the potential for a first round bye for 4 teams now.
Yep.
Going into this, we thought San Francisco pretty much had it locked down, and Baltimore just opened that window. So we'll see what happens here in the next 2 weeks. Philly's got some pretty easy games coming up. Dallas has a couple tough ones. Detroit's got a couple tough ones. So,
and the thing too is, the Rams have kind of struggled against the 49ers, but week 18, Stafford and them are going to be playing more than likely for a playoff berth, because I think they'll beat the Giants this week. And I mean, there are ways they can clinch this week, but I don't think they'll happen. Stafford and them going to play the 49ers in what could be a game that could ultimately cost the 49ers the 1 seed would be huge too. Like that, there's just a lot of funny things that are coming out of that week. I think week 18 is going to be insane.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. So let's jump into the second part, which I touched base on here briefly, which is the league MVP conversation. So going into the game, Brock Purdy, by all accounts, was the front runner for a lot of people to win the MVP for the league. The odds have updated since last night's game, and it has changed quite a bit. Lamar Jackson is now sitting at the top spot. He is minus 170 to win the league MVP. The second one, which I'm actually kind of happy about seeing, is Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey right now sitting at plus 470. I like seeing a non-quarterback in a position to be able to do this, and McCaffrey's had a ridiculous season. One of the things that has been a little surprising to me is that these top 6 guys, Tyreek Hill is not in the conversation, and he's still gunning for potentially a 2,000-yard season, which is insane. So to finalize that list here, we've got Tua is sitting at plus 900. Josh Allen and Brock Purdy are now at 1,300. So Brock Purdy dropped substantially. And then Dak Prescott, who, if you look at the quarterback numbers between all the guys that I just mentioned, has an argument as the best performing quarterback out of this bunch, is sitting at plus 1,900. So he's a long shot to win the MVP. Some of their road losses and things like that, I think, have definitely hurt. But Lamar Jackson is currently the favorite to win at minus 170. When I look at the statistics, man, I honestly think Christian McCaffrey is more deserving of the MVP this year based on what he's done. But what are your thoughts? What are you thinking as far as who you think is going to win the MVP and who do you think should win the MVP?
Well, I'd just like to throw with McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey's kind of like Caleb Williams with the Heisman this year. Probably could win it, but there's no chance in hell he will win it. Like, I don't think there's any way McCaffrey wins this. In my opinion, I think Lamar should win it just because I think this award is best player on the best team. And right now, to me, they are the best team. It is hit miss though. If I was giving it, honestly, if I'm giving it out, I'm probably giving it to Tyreek, but I still think best player on the best team is who the award goes to. And right now that's going to be Lamar. Obviously things can change in the next couple weeks, but to me, Lamar is the winner.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking at the MVP award, and the last MVP that was handed out to a non-quarterback was 2012 to Adrian Peterson. So It's been a while. All of the other guys are quarterbacks. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Best player on best team. I get it. This is the same argument that we had with the whole Heisman conversation and Jaden Daniels. Yep. I thought Jaden Daniels was the most deserving. He ended up winning it, despite the fact that he was not by far on the best team. And he had some stiff competition there, but
yeah, because it should have been Penix that won it.
Yeah, but we talked about this in the podcast just a minute ago. Like,
yep.
Penix and the Huskies are not getting any respect for some ungodly reason. I don't understand why. But this is also the same group of people that didn't put Florida State into the college football invitational. So I digress. Right. All right, let's take a look at the current AFC playoff picture here. So as it sits right now, Baltimore is sitting in the 1 spot. They get a first round bye. The 3 wild card games right now, as it sits, Indianapolis would be going to Miami. Buffalo would be going to Kansas City, and Cleveland would be going to Jacksonville. Houston is still in the hunt, as well as Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Denver Broncos, which long shots, but definitely interesting that they found a way to even be in, part of the conversation, especially how they started the year. I see some really strong matchups. That Buffalo at KC game is going to be real interesting, the way that Buffalo's been playing, if this is how it shakes out. Cleveland has been playing very well, and they've got Joe Flacco, who's been playing out of his mind for the age that he's in. He's got fresh legs because he's not been playing, right? So, I mean, that's a big benefit to the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if Jacksonville's going to be sitting in that 4 spot, though, the way that they've been playing. Trevor Lawrence is also dealing now with another injury with a right shoulder deal. They said that it's not anything major, but we'll see what happens there. Looking at the teams here, Workman, I think you've got the front view of the remaining games. Taking a look at who's got what remaining right now, do you see anything that you potentially would see shaken up on the AFC side?
Let's see. Baltimore's got 2 tough games. Miami, obviously the winner of Miami-Baltimore is huge because there's 1 seed implications there. But Miami also is going to have Buffalo right after that, which is huge.
Yeah, and that Miami game is in Baltimore too, which I think makes a difference.
Yeah, I do too. Even the Colts, I mean, with Vegas, if Stroud's back for Houston in that game, like, those are 2 tough games, I think, too. Like, no one really has actually, you know what? Cleveland, I think, has a decent schedule, and I think the Chiefs have a good schedule remaining. Obviously, the Chiefs are going to need to play a little better. Well, the Chiefs' defense was fine. Their offense was just horrendous. maybe we talked a little bit earlier this year about Bieniemy being like we didn't think Bieniemy would be that big of a deal with Nagy still being there and Andy Reid, but I think Bieniemy might have mattered.
Yeah,
There's,
I think at this point it's obvious.
I mean, either that or the wide receiver talent is just so bad. But I don't know. Like the Chiefs have to get something figured out and figure it out quick because they're going to be in trouble if not. But I think that Cincinnati and at the Chargers are easy games, and I do like Cleveland playing the Jets and at Cincinnati. One thing that's interesting with this current scenario, I think Cleveland would beat Jacksonville, and then if Buffalo were to beat Kansas City, that's the 5 and the 6 winning, which means Baltimore's going to have to play. If that was the case, they would play Buffalo in the second round, and if Kansas City were to win and Cleveland were to win, then Baltimore would play Cleveland, which is a division rival. So Baltimore's going to be in trouble in their very first game. I feel like, regardless of what goes on, I think it's going to be a lot of tough matchups here. But yeah, the just for remaining schedule wise, looking at these teams in the hunt too, I actually like Vegas too. Colts and Denver, I think they could end up 9-8. Now, whether 9-8 gets them in or not is a different story, but I do like their remaining schedule.
Yeah, it's just crazy that like the AFC West is still not 100% locked up. The AFC North still isn't 100% locked up, despite these teams doing pretty well. I mean, Baltimore clinches the AFC North if they win this week, or if Cleveland loses, which I don't think Cleveland's losing at home to the Jets. Baltimore clinches the 1 seed and the first round bye if they get the win as well. So if Baltimore wins the game against Miami, they've taken care of business and will be the 1 seed. And then how everything else shakes out, it depends obviously a number of factors. Buffalo is going to clinch a playoff berth with 14 different scenarios, which is pretty insane. I'm not going to go through all of them.
Like 8 of those are including a Buffalo tie. Only 5 of them include them winning.
Yeah. In 3 of the ones where Buffalo wins, they still need Pittsburgh to lose. And then they also need Cincinnati, Jacksonville, or Houston to lose, plus Indy. Like there's a lot of things that need to shake out there. There are 14 different scenarios currently where Buffalo could end up getting a playoff berth at the end of this week. If Cincinnati, Houston, and Indy all lose, and then Buffalo ties or wins, which, you know, it's a matter of a bunch of different things here. Right. Cleveland is another situation. Cleveland can clinch with a win or a tie. If Pittsburgh loses, Cleveland is in regardless. If Buffalo loses, Cleveland's in. If Jacksonville loses, Cleveland's in. And if Houston and Indy both lose, Cleveland is in. So Cleveland also has a lot of opportunity here in their game on Thursday. Most importantly, the fact that they're playing at home where they have played a hell of a lot better than they have on the road, and they're playing the Jets, who don't have a quarterback or a number of other players. So right. Cleveland looks like they're going to be in the playoffs. The AFC South is the most interesting division right now because we've got 3 teams sitting at 8-7. And there's some games being played within the division still to be played. So it'll be interesting. Jacksonville definitely has the easier schedule out of those 3. They're at home against Carolina, and then their last game of the year is at Tennessee. Tennessee could play them relatively well considering it's a division game, but yeah, all things considered, the AFC playoff picture I think is going to be a little bit more solidified after this week, with a couple things still up in the air. Yeah. Moving into the NFC side of the equation, this is where things start to get a little interesting after the game last night. So right now, San Francisco still sits in the 1 spot, so they do get that bye. Their remaining games are at Washington this week, and then they are at home against the Rams, which we just talked about. If everything sits how it sits currently, the 3 wildcard games would be Seattle at Philadelphia. I don't want to play Seattle if I'm Philadelphia. That offense has been playing relatively decent. I don't know what the hell's going on with Jalen Hurts, but I heard the guys on NFL Network today talking about Matt Patricia and trying to give him all these outs for why it's going to be difficult for him to implement a system. And I'm like, he could have had 3 years to implement his defensive system. It's not going to matter, but
he sucks.
Yeah. So we've got Seattle at Philly, the Rams at Detroit, which we talked about at the beginning of the year. And right now that is the matchup. So Stafford would be going back home to Detroit for the first playoff game in quite a while. I'd be interested to hear who you're going to be rooting for there, because that's going to be a tough one for you.
Brutal.
Yeah. And then Dallas would be playing at Tampa Bay, which I don't know as a Dallas fan if I'd rather play Tampa or if I'd rather play Seattle in the first game. I mean, if we're playing Seattle, that means we have a home game, so that bodes well for Dallas. But Tampa's been on fire as of late. Their offense is looking really good. So that's a little scary. Now that said, Tampa's not 100% in yet. They do clinch the playoff and the NFC South division title if they win this week in their game against New Orleans at home, or they can tie and Atlanta can get a loss and they would clinch. We still have some teams in the hunt. Minnesota, Atlanta, Green Bay, New Orleans are all sitting at 7-8, and then long shot would be the Bears, who are sitting at 6-9 and need a million things to go right in order for them to get in. But looking at the playoff schedule here, the Rams, they are going to be able to get a playoff berth if they get a win and Seattle loses, or if they win and then Green Bay and Minnesota somehow tie. Philly is going to lock in their NFC East title if they get a win and Dallas loses, or if they tie and Dallas loses. So that is predicated on Dallas either losing or tying with Detroit, which isn't likely to happen. The tie, I mean, it's very possible we could lose. San Francisco, they clinch the 1 seed first round bye and home field advantage if they win and then both Detroit and Philly lose. So they're going to be watching these games ahead of time because I think San Francisco, I can't remember what time the San Francisco game is at this week. It's at 1:00, and that's the same time that Philly is. So they're not going to be able to do any screen watching. They'll be able to see what happens with Dallas and Detroit, but that Philly game is going to be something's happening while they're playing at Washington. And then Seattle is the final team we haven't talked about yet. They will clinch a playoff berth if they get a win, and then there is a Green Bay Minnesota tie. So
essentially, they're not clinching anything this week.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of different scenarios. Week 18 is definitely going to be in play for both of these conferences. What sticks out to you here on the NFC side?
I just really like this battle for the 1 seed, and honestly, the battle for the NFC East also, because Dallas and Philly, it's going to be fun to watch what happens there. Obviously, we're going to have a big hand in that. I want to see the Rams make the playoffs, so obviously I'm going to be watching heavily the Rams-Giants game Sunday. And then the final week they'll be in San Francisco. There's not really – I would love to see Washington give the Niners a threat this weekend. That would be huge, but I don't think that's really going to happen. I think where it gets interesting is Seattle and Pittsburgh. I think if Pittsburgh could beat Seattle this weekend, then we're opening the door for some of these teams that have losing records right now. Clearly Minnesota played us last week, and big injuries. Hawkinson got hurt. Addison got hurt. What's his name? Jesus. Mullins was terrible. So, I mean, I don't know. Minnesota's kind of Justin Jefferson or bust at this point, but Atlanta, Atlanta's probably got the most favorable schedule, to be honest. They should be 9-8 when you look at it on paper, but will they be? I mean, they're so unpredictable right now. Who knows?
And it's 2 road games too. They're playing at Chicago and at New Orleans, and they do not play as well on the road as they do at home.
Packers are at Minnesota and Chicago. Like, those are 2 very winnable games. Honestly, the Saints at Tampa and Atlanta are 2. Like, these games are very winnable games for these teams. Like, it's just it's going to be crazy how it all comes down. God, this is Tampa, New Orleans, and at Carolina. Yeah, I don't know. I still think the most interesting thing is going to be the race for the 1 seed, and then whoever ends up winning between Philly and Dallas, because someone's going to have to go on the road to start the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, I mean, obviously there's a lot of games this week in week 17 that are within a 3.5 point spread. So it's going to be close. Really, really interested to see how things shake out. So let's jump right in here to our week 17 picks. All right. Our Thursday night matchup features the 6-9 New York Jets against the 10-5 Cleveland Browns, 8 p.m. at Cleveland Browns Stadium in Cleveland. The Jets are coming off a 2-point home win against the Commanders, while the Browns are returning home after getting a big 14-point win against Houston on Sunday. The Jets are mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, but the Browns are still very much in the hunt and currently sit in the 5 seed for the playoffs. Cleveland is favored by 7.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the WF nickname that we've heard on this podcast a few times for their quarterback, but I am
thank you.
I'm a big fan of Schwartz, as I made clear every week. I love Jim Schwartz. I love what this defense is doing. The Jets offense is terrible. They're going to be in Cleveland. I love Cleveland here. The only thing that scares me is it's a Thursday night game. They've all been kind of close and terrible. So, but I don't think even that can save this one. So I'm going to go with Cleveland -7.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm taking Cleveland here. They've won 3 straight. They're playing considerably better at home than they are on the road. Should be a potentially dangerous team to shake things up as the playoffs start. So I'm taking Cleveland here as well. Next up, we have a Saturday night matchup that could see repeated in the playoffs as the 11-4 Detroit Lions go up against the 10-5 Dallas Cowboys, 8:15 at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Detroit is coming off a 6-point victory against the Vikings in Minnesota and have officially locked the NFC North division, their first division title in 30 years. Eat them up. The Cowboys, meanwhile, are returning home after 2 straight losses and are a long shot for the NFC East crown, but have already locked in their own playoff berth, currently sitting in the 5 seed. Dallas is favored by 6 at home.
Yeah, road game for the Lions, but it is indoors still on turf. I think 6 is too many points. I don't know if we win this game, but I think this is a close game. We really haven't been blown out in a long time. So I like the Lions to cover here. I would really love to see them win this game because a 1 seed would be incredible. But I think we can at least cover this one.
Yeah, if it were any other team than Dallas playing them, I'd be rooting all the way for Detroit. And frankly, I hope there's some way possible that we end up meeting in the NFC championship game by some miracle. To no surprise, I'm taking my boys. We have lost 2 straight, but like the Browns, been playing much better at home than on the road. I'm hoping that this is a get-right game for Dallas as we head towards the last week of the season. We're playing Washington. Definitely need to get these 2 wins in order to lock in some playoff seeding. So I am going to take Dallas here to hopefully be able to get a W by at least a touchdown. Kicking off our Sunday games, we have another matchup that we could see repeated come playoff time as the 11-4 Miami Dolphins meet the 12-3 Baltimore Ravens, 1 p.m. at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore. The Dolphins are hitting the road after securing a win against the Cowboys last Saturday on a time-expiring field goal, while the Ravens return to Charm City after getting a huge 14-point win over the Niners in San Fran last night. Both of these teams have secured playoff spots and currently sit 1-2 in the conference, with Baltimore 1 game ahead of Miami for the first-round bye. The Ravens are favored by 3.5.
I am going to go with Baltimore here. I think they showed me enough last night. Miami squeaked by a game. It does suck that Baltimore's on a shorter week, but I just like them at home. And you might even get some elements too. You never know what kind of weather we're going to have in that game, but I do like Baltimore minus the 3.5.
Yeah, this will be a fun game. I have no idea why NFL isn't flexing this one in the primetime spot to replace the Packers-Vikings game. Miami's offense up against this defense should be a fun one. I am going to take the home team here and go with Baltimore to get at least a 4-point win, but this should be possibly the best game of the week. Next up, we have an AFC East divisional matchup as the 4-11 New England Patriots face off against the 9-6 Buffalo Bills, 1 p.m. at Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park. The Patriots are coming off a surprising 3-point road win against the Broncos in Mile High, while the Bills return home after getting a closer than expected 2-point win against the Chargers in LA and are currently on a 3-game winning streak. The Patriots are eliminated from playoff contention, while the Bills have climbed up the ladder over the past 3 weeks and now sit in the 6th seed. Buffalo is favored by 11.5.
Yeah, I'm on Buffalo in this one. I like them at home, and this game is much more meaningful to them. I'm really not sure how New England pulled out that win this weekend or why they did, because it kind of ruined their draft pick, but I know that's not really what they're about, but still, I like Buffalo to get the cover here.
Yeah, I think that could be a little bit of Belichick just trying to give him the old heave-ho before he walks out the door. This is a tough one because the size of the spread, and New England beat the Bills early in the year. I know this is a different Buffalo team right now. Buffalo's been playing better as of late, but the Pats have kept games within 10 more often than not throughout the year. I'm going to take a gamble here and take the Pats here plus the 11.5 and think that they can keep it within 10 points. Next up, we have the 7-8 Atlanta Falcons against the 6-9 Chicago Bears, 1 p.m. at Soldier Field in Chicago. Atlanta came up with a big 19-point win at home against the Colts last week, while the Bears are coming off their own 11-point home win against the Cardinals. Both of these teams are yet to be officially eliminated from playoff contention, although they are both currently on the outside looking in. Chicago is favored by 3.
Yeah, Atlanta, like we've said, is so unpredictable. The Bears at home, I like Fields at home doing what he's been doing. I'm going to go with Chicago.
I'm with you. Atlanta has not fared well away from home, and the Bears have won their last 4 in Chicago. So I'm going to take Justin Fields and the Bears here -3. Next, we have the 5-10 Tennessee Titans against the 8-7 Houston Texans, 1 p.m. at NRG Stadium in Houston. Tennessee is coming off a 3-point home loss against the Seahawks, while the Texans lost by 14 at home to the Browns. The Titans are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, while the Texans remain in the hunt, with both Indy and Jacksonville losing last week. Houston is favored by 3.5.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to be Houston's quarterback this week. I don't know if that's out yet or not, but I do like Tennessee in this one, plus the points.
Yeah, it sounds like Stroud's going to be back. And I think that's obviously is what's going to make the difference here. So given that Stroud starts the game, I will take Houston as well. Next up, we have the 7-8 Las Vegas Raiders against the 8-7 Indianapolis Colts, 1 p.m. at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. The Raiders stunned the NFL with a 6-point win over the Chiefs in Kansas City on Monday, while the Colts return home after an 18-point loss against the Falcons in Atlanta. The Raiders are currently on the outside looking in, but have won 2 straight and could find their way into the playoffs if they can keep winning, while the Colts currently sit in 7th and final seed of the AFC playoffs, but also need to keep winning and keep pace with both Jacksonville and Houston. Indy is favored by 3.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with the Raiders here. I don't know if they'll win the game, but 3, I think they can keep it within 3. I do like what Vegas is doing with Antonio Pierce. I'm going to go with Vegas.
Yeah, I've bounced back and forth on this one because I can see this game being a push. Both of these teams have been a little bit up and down, but credit both of these teams for getting to where they're at right now, despite a rough season for both organizations. I am going to ride with Indy here being the home team to get the win, but I will not be surprised if this is a push. Next, we have the 8-7 LA Rams against the 5-10 New York Giants, 1 p.m. at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford. The Rams hit the road to the Big Apple after an 8-point home win over the Saints last Thursday, while the Giants return home after an 8-point loss to the Eagles Monday afternoon. LA currently sits in the 6th spot in the NFC playoffs, while the Giants are eliminated. Rams are favored by 6.5.
Yeah, it's a short week for the Giants, and they've already got quarterback controversy now. They put Cutlets on the bench, so it'll be interesting to see what they come out with at home. The Rams, this is a very meaningful game, and I think this is one that they're going to want really bad, so I'm going to take the Rams here.
Yep, I'm taking the Rams as well. This team's coming on at the right time. McVay should have these guys ready to get a W and work towards securing that playoff spot. Next up, we have the 11-4 San Francisco 49ers going up against the 4-11 Washington Commanders, 1 p.m. at FedEx Field in Landover. San Fran looks to bounce back as they hit the road after a 14-point loss to the Ravens last night, while the Commanders return to D.C. after a 2-point loss in New York against the Jets. San Fran has secured the NFC West and currently sits in the 1 seed in the NFC, while the Commanders have been eliminated from the playoffs for a couple of weeks now. San Fran is favored by 13.5.
Yeah, it is a lot of points. Again, short week, East Coast, so they're playing an early morning game. I 13.5 is a lot. I'm going to take the Niners, but I'm honestly not going to be shocked if they don't cover those.
Yeah, it's another. I'm taking the Niners here as well. Washington's on the longest losing streak in the NFL right now. San Fran's likely going to take some of their frustrations out on the Commanders after last night's loss. So I am going to roll with the Niners, but this is a substantial spread. Next, we have the 2-13 Carolina Panthers against the 8-7 Jacksonville Jaguars, 1 p.m. at Everbank Stadium in Jacksonville. The Panthers found some offense last week, but still couldn't find a W, losing by 3 at home to the Packers, while the Jags return home after an 18-point loss to Tampa and is now on a 4-game losing streak. Carolina is well out of playoff contention, while the Jags are currently deadlocked in a 3-way tie with Indy and Houston in the AFC South, but currently hold the 4th spot in the playoffs based on tiebreakers. Also worth noting, and we talked about this a little bit ago, Jags QB Trevor Lawrence did suffer a right shoulder sprain in last week's game. Although it doesn't appear to be severe enough to keep him out of this matchup, it is worth noting Jacksonville is favored by 7.
Yeah, I think just for the sake of the importance of the game, I'm going to take Jacksonville minus the 7. But Carolina has played the last few weeks a little closer to teams than what most people would have expected them to. But Jacksonville at home, and it's a very meaningful game. I think you've got to anticipate them to win this one pretty easily.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one a little bit. If Trevor Lawrence somehow misses this game, I'll take Carolina, but he's yet to miss a game in the NFL so far. So I'm guessing he's going to find a way to be behind center, and I'll take Jacksonville at home. Next, we have the 3-12 Arizona Cardinals against the 11-4 Philadelphia Eagles, 1 p.m. at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. Arizona lost by 11 to the Bears in Chicago last week, while the Eagles got an 8-point win against the Giants at home Monday afternoon. Arizona has the second worst record in the NFL and is out of the playoffs, while the Eagles have clinched a playoff spot and currently sit in the 2 spot, but have yet to lock in the NFC East, with the Cowboys 1 game back and 2 games left. Philly is favored by 10.5.
Yeah, I'm going to take Philly in this one. 10.5. Again, it's kind of a bigger spread, and they haven't been playing that fantastic lately, but at some point you feel like they have to get something going, and Arizona's a pretty good team on the road to get something going against, especially because that's going to be an early morning game for them. So I do like Philly in this one.
Yeah, that's really what swung me this way, is the fact that it's going to be an early morning game for Arizona. But this game honestly scares me a little bit because Philly hasn't covered a spread since like week 11. They're way more talented than Arizona, but they're not playing up to their talent level.
It's their former coordinator too. Their D coordinator's back.
Yeah, so that throws something else into the wrench there. I'm still going to take Philly because it's Arizona, but I would not be surprised if Philly does not cover this game. All right. Next, we have a big NFC South matchup as the 7-8 New Orleans Saints go up against the 8-7 Tampa Bay Bucks. 1 p.m. at Ray J. Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. The Saints lost by 8 to the Rams last week, while the Bucks beat the Jags by 18 at home, making it 4 in a row. A big game as the Bucks have a 1-game lead over the Saints for the division crown, and a win by New Orleans would definitely shake things up. The Saints are currently on the outside looking in, while the Bucks are in the 4th spot on the NFC side of the bracket. Tampa is favored by 2.5.
Yeah, I'll pick this to pick it. We know the game. I'm not picking the Saints, so I'll take the Bucks minus 2.5.
Yeah, I kind of figured. This spread's honestly a little surprising to me, just because Tampa's been playing well. I thought it'd be maybe 3.5, 4.5, but I'm either way. I'm going to take Baker and the Bucks. Next, we have the 8-7 Pittsburgh Steelers against the 8-7 Seattle Seahawks. 4 p.m. at Lumen Field in Seattle. Pittsburgh is coming off a 23-point victory over the Bengals last Saturday in Pittsburgh, while the Seahawks return home after securing a 3-point win over the Titans on Sunday. Pittsburgh is currently out of the playoff picture, but still has an opportunity to play their way in, while the Seahawks are currently one of 3 NFC West teams in the playoffs currently and sit in the 7th seed at the moment. Seattle is favored by 3.5.
Yeah, I think this game might be better than people think. It's be a tough environment, though. I'm gonna go with Seattle to win and cover here, but man, I don't know. Can Mason go on the road and do something for the Steelers? Will be interesting to see. But I think Seattle's who we got to take here.
Yeah, I'm taking Seattle. Seattle wants to hold on to that wild card spot. The 12th man, I think, is going to be the difference here. They should show up, make it nice and loud for Rudolph, and give Pittsburgh some of those problems. So yeah, I'm going to take Seattle at home. Next, we have the 8-7 Cincinnati Bengals against the 9-6 Kansas City Chiefs. 4:25 at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. The Bengals are coming off a 23-point loss to the Steelers in Pittsburgh, while the Saints just took a surprising L from the Raiders in Kansas City yesterday and now sit at 4-4 at home this year. Cincinnati is not yet eliminated from playoffs, but needs a lot to go right in order to sneak in, while the Chiefs still maintain a 2-game lead in the AFC West and will lock in the division with a win. KC is favored by 7.
Yeah, I've got the Chiefs hopefully coming back to life here and winning the division, and I'm going to have them covering the 7-2.
Yeah, they haven't won an Arrowhead in 2 months, which is crazy. Cincy's defense could also potentially give this offense some trouble since they're already scoring. Or they're having trouble scoring, I should say. I'm going to take KC here to win or push, knowing what's going on and that they're not 100% locked into their division yet. But they've got to get right, and they've got to use these next 2 weeks to get right. They can't go into the playoffs playing like they're playing right now. All right, next up, the 5-10 LA Chargers meet the 7-8 Denver Broncos in an AFC West divisional matchup. 4:25 at Empower Field at Mile High in Denver. The Chargers hit the road after a close 2-point home loss against Buffalo in LA last Saturday, while the Broncos looked to bounce back as they took a 3-point loss on Sunday at the hands of Bill Belichick and the Patriots. LA is eliminated from playoff contention, while the Broncos are currently out of the playoffs, but 2 wins to finish the season may get them in. Denver is favored by 5.5.
Yeah, I was surprised by how well the Chargers played the Bills. I am going to take Denver, though, at home in this one. I like them to cover the 5.5.
Yep, I'm taking the Broncos here to bounce back and get a win as well. All right, our last game of the week here as the 7-8 Green Bay Packers face off against the division rival 7-8 Minnesota Vikings. 8:25 at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Green Bay squeaked out a 3-point win over Carolina in Charlotte on Sunday, while the Vikings lost by 6 at home and handed the division crown to the Detroit Lions for the first time since 1993. This game could have potential playoff implications in the wild card, as both teams are currently on the bubble, but could sneak in depending on how these last 2 weeks shake out. Minnesota is favored by 1.5.
Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be a tough game, I feel like, because, like I said, Minnesota's got a lot of injuries now, and I think they're Justin Jefferson or bust. But I'm going to go with Minnesota, I think, just because they're on the home field. But this is an interesting game. I mean, either one could win this game. It's not going to surprise me. But I'm going to take Minnesota just because they're the home team.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Green Bay here. Minnesota, as you just talked about, has so many questions. Hawkinson's out with the ACL, MCL. Like, it's just they're struggling right now. I think Green Bay has more talent on the team as it stands on the field anyway. So I'm going to take Green Bay to get a road win here in this one. All right, guys, that is it for week 17 games. There are, again, no bye week teams. There won't be for the rest of the year. So now we are going to move into our locks. I am 13-3 this year, and Workman is 11-5. Jake, who is your lock for this week?
I'm taking my guy. Give me Stafford and the Rams -6.5 versus the Giants.
All right, locking in on the Rams over the Giants. I'm going to go with a Thursday night game here and lock in on Cleveland over the Jets. The Brownies have been taking care of business at home all year on both sides of the ball. I really expect Schwartz in that defense to give Wilson, whoever's under center, all kinds of problems. So lock me in on Cleveland over the Jets. All right, guys, that is it for us for week 17 picks. Workman, you got anything here before we jump?
Not really. Just interested to see how it all plays out this weekend. We're going to have a lot more clarity, I feel like, at the end of this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely more clarity, but I think there's still going to be some things that are going to be up in the air. So definitely be paying attention to what happens this week as we move into week 18. Obviously, once these games are all wrapped up, we will continue this into playoffs. We've been a little inventive in some of the content that we've been creating on the NCAA side. So maybe we'll do something similar for NFL as we jump into playoff scenarios and we have less games to pick. But if you guys have not checked out the podcast on the NCAA side, please do so. We're covering a lot of transfer portal stuff right now. We've got a lot of stuff going on with all these bowl games. This is our last major week as far as picks go. And then we've got the national championship coming up next week. So fun stuff. But that is it for us. For Jacob Workman, I am Reese Downing. This is TNT Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast, NFL edition, week 17. Like, share, subscribe on all channels, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, all that fun stuff. And we will see you guys next week. Cheers.
See ya.